If I told you that just the simple act of holding a ballpoint pen could actually reduce your monthly spending, you would probably think selling you some kind of magic ink.
Yeah, right. It sounds completely counterintuitive in an era where we just want everything optimized and automated.
Exactly.
We're so conditioned to believe that faster and easier is inherently better. But when it comes to behavioral economics and how our brains process finite resources, removing that friction might actually be the very thing sabotaging our goals.
And that is exactly the tension we are exploring today. For this deep dive, we're pulling apart a surprisingly dense video source. It's titled Digital Paper Budgeting, which is right for you.mp4.
A very literal title.
Very little. But our mission here isn't just to, tell you what's in the video. We really want to dissect the mechanics of these two primary budgeting methods, so digital and paper. We want to tear down the psychology behind both of them.
Because we really need to understand why one method might completely fail you where the other succeeds, right? It's about helping you find the system that aligns with your specific cognitive style.
Yeah, because if you're out there listening and you're struggling to manage your finances, or, just feeling completely overwhelmed by the very idea of planning a budget, you are definitely not alone.
Absolutely not. And if we look at the source, it strips away all the intimidating financial jargon and brings everything back to this very foundational baseline. I mean, the methodology you choose is practically irrelevant until we understand the core mechanism of what we're actually trying to achieve here.
Okay, let's unpack this. Starting with the source's baseline definition. Strip away the anxiety, the guilt, the complex investment portfolios. What actually is budgeting in the context of this material?
Well, the source defines it with this elegant, almost brutal simplicity. Budgeting is just the act of tracking your income and tracking your expenses. Period.
That's it.
That is it. You are measuring the inflow and you are measuring the outflow. And the purpose is strictly twofold, right? To control your spending and to save money. That is the entire equation.
I want to use an analogy here because simply saying tracking income and expenses sounds, a bit dry.
It really does. It sounds like a corporate ledger.
Right. So let's think of budgeting less like a spreadsheet and more like navigating a journey, like a road trip.
Okay, I like that.
So you have to know your starting point, which is your income, right? That is where you begin the trip.
Yeah.
And then you have your obstacles along the road. Those are your expenses. The toll booths, the flat tires, the gas stations. You have to navigate all of those obstacles to finally reach your destination, which is saving money.
That is a perfect analogy, actually, because to navigate a journey effectively, you really have to understand the different types of obstacles you're going to hit. And the source specifically distinguishes between fixed expenses and variable expenses.
Which are different types of roadblocks.
Exactly. Now, anyone managing their own finances probably understands the basics of a fixed cost versus a variable cost. But the text emphasizes this distinction because the behavioral approach to these two categories is wildly different.
Let's drill into that. We all know fixed costs are, well, they're the heavy, unmovable objects in the room.
Mm-hmm.
The mortgage, the car note, insurance premiums.
Right. They just sit there. They require almost zero ongoing executive function. I mean, once you sign the lease or you take out the loan, the cognitive load of that expense is pretty much gone. It just happens in the background.
Yeah, it's on autopilot.
But variable expenses, however, are where the journey actually gets treacherous. The groceries, dining out, the endless subscription services, impulsive online purchases.
The 2 a.m. online shopping sprees.
We've all been there. But the source highlights this division because your variable expenses are the primary arena where you exercise that control we talked about.
Right, because you can't really negotiate your rent on a random Tuesday.
No, you can't. But you make dozens and dozens of micro decisions every single week about your variable spending. That is where lifestyle creep happens.
So we have the baseline. We know the starting point, the inflow. We know the fixed obstacles. We know the variable obstacles where the actual behavioral battle is fought.
Correct.
But if the underlying math, income minus expenses, is just an objective universal law, why does the method we choose to track it even matter? Like, math is math. Whether I do it on a napkin or an iPhone app, 2 minus 1 is always going to be 1.
This raises an important question. And it really strikes at the absolute core of the source text.
Okay.
That underlying math is objective, yes, but human behavior is entirely subjective.
All right.
The source emphasizes that the choice between digital and paper is critical because these methods have very unique pros and cons that cater to completely different personal styles. How you interact with that objective math changes everything about how your brain assigns value to it.
So it's about the delivery system of the information. Well, let's crack open the first tool in the toolbox then, the digital route.
So the source categorizes digital budgeting as the use of apps and software to manage the entire tracking ecosystem.
And it lays out a very specific, almost front-loaded workflow.
It does.
You download the app, you input your income and establish your fixed expenses. Basically, you're telling the algorithm what your baseline looks like. And from there, the software kind of just takes over. You track your variable spending over time, and then you review your spending trends and adjust.
Let's pause on that workflow for a second because the architecture of those steps is incredibly vital. Notice that the manual labor is almost entirely contained in step 1 and step 2.
Yeah, the setup phase.
Right. You do the heavy lifting of inputting the static data once, and after that, you are essentially outsourcing your executive function to the software. The source champions this method for making expense tracking vastly easier and more accessible.
I want to paint this scenario the source gives us to illustrate this accessibility because, I mean, it sounds like an absolute dream.
It does sound pretty great.
You get your paycheck, it hits your account, maybe you quickly enter a figure into the app, or, maybe it's linked directly to your bank and syncs automatically.
Which a lot of them do now.
Exactly.
Yep.
And instantly you get feedback. There's no calculating, there's no double checking your addition, no sorting through a shoebox of crumpled receipts.
And that instant gratification, that feedback loop, is arguably the most powerful feature of the digital method. The source points to 2 specific elements that drive this automated calculations and visual charts.
Oh, I love a good chart.
Right. Let's talk about the visual aspect first. When an app generates a pie chart or a trend line, it is basically bypassing the analytical centers of your brain and delivering immediate emotional data.
Wait, really? Emotional data?
Yeah, because you aren't staring at a column of raw, abstract numbers and trying to mentally calculate ratios. You see a massive, bright red slice of a pie chart, and you instantly realize, uh-oh, I am spending way too much of my income on dining out.
Right. It translates raw data into a visual narrative. You don't have to think about it.
It does. And the automated calculations remove the cognitive barrier to entry. If you had to manually calculate the exact percentage of your income that you spent on variable entertainment every single week,
I definitely wouldn't do it.
Nobody would. The app removes the friction of the math, allowing you to focus purely on the analysis and spotting those trends without any manual effort.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. I hear everything you're saying about removing friction and outsourcing the math, but
There's a but.
there's a massive but.
Mhm.
If the app is just quietly reconciling our accounts in the background, generating beautiful charts without us having to actually engage with the raw numbers, doesn't that convenience inherently disconnect us from the reality of our choices?
You're touching on the fundamental vulnerability of automation.
Because if I just swipe my card and the app automatically categorizes it, does the math, and updates a little progress bar, I haven't really done anything. The money almost feels, I don't know, synthetic.
Synthetic is a great word for it.
It's just pixels moving around on a screen. If my goal is to actually control my spending, shouldn't the act of spending hurt just a little bit?
That is the exact trade-off the source implies when it contrasts these 2 methods. The digital route optimizes for convenience and automation. But when tracking becomes frictionless, the spending itself often becomes frictionless.
Wow. Yeah.
Think about the concept of cognitive dissonance. When you have to manually deduct funds, like actually hand over cash or write a number down, there is a momentary psychological pain. It's a confrontation with your own choices.
Right, because you feel it leaving your possession.
Exactly. But when an algorithm does it invisibly, you are insulated from that pain until you happen to open the app and look at the chart. You might be tracking your money perfectly, mathematically speaking, but you aren't really feeling the weight of it.
Which is the perfect pivot into the other side of this methodology. Because if the digital route risks making you completely numb to your own finances, the paper route is designed to make you feel every single cent.
Oh, absolutely.
The source uses a very specific phrase for paper budgeting. It calls it a tactile approach.
A tactile approach. And if the digital workflow was front-loaded and totally automated, the paper workflow is deliberately, relentlessly manual.
Yeah, the steps are way different.
Very different. The source outlines them clearly. You physically grab a notebook, you write out your monthly income with a pen, you list every single fixed and variable expense by hand. You have to create and label your own specific categories for spending, and then, and this is the big one, you regularly sit down to check your actual spending against your budget, doing all the math yourself.
Is a radically different environment. Contrast the scenario we just painted of the Instant App update with the paper scenario from the source.
It's night and day.
You aren't just glancing at a notification on your watch while you're waiting in line for coffee. You have to carve out time, sit at a table, gather up your receipts, physically write out each individual expense, and tally those totals manually.
The physical act of writing is not just a different medium, it's a completely different cognitive process altogether.
It reminds me of driving a manual transmission car.
Oh, I like where this is going.
Right. Because we all know automatic cars are more efficient, they shift faster, they require way less work from the driver.
Yeah.
But when you drive a stick shift, you are physically tethered to the momentum of the machine. You have to feel the engine's RPMs, you have to engage the clutch, physically move the gear selector, and manage that exact friction point. If you aren't paying deliberate, continuous attention,
The car stalls.
exactly, the car stalls out in the middle of the intersection. Paper budgeting feels exactly like driving your finances with a manual transmission. It's simple, but you have to feel every single shift and movement yourself.
What's fascinating here is the psychological weight of that personal touch and simplicity. Writing everything down forces a different kind of deliberate attention to the numbers.
Because you can't ignore it.
You can't. When you physically form numbers with a pen, you are engaging your motor cortex, your visual processing, and your analytical center simultaneously. You cannot passively write down that you spent, say, $85 on a jacket.
Right. You're literally drawing the 8 and the 5.
Yes. Your brain is forced to slow down and process that specific transaction. This tactile memory creates a really profound psychological anchor.
You are literally forcing yourself to sit with your decisions. You can't just swipe away a push notification or blame the app's algorithm for miscategorizing a purchase. You have to look at the receipt, write the number down, and subtract it from your total. The friction is the point.
Exactly. For someone who suffers from that frictionless spending we talked about earlier, someone who feels totally disconnected from where their money is vanishing to, that manual high-friction tallying provides a very aggressive grounding.
Yet forces you back to reality.
It takes the abstract concept of a variable expense and makes it painfully tangible. But, we have to be intellectually honest about the cost of this method.
Which is what? Burnout.
Compliance failure. The very friction that makes paper budgeting so effective is also its greatest liability. It requires dedicated time, ongoing discipline, and an active willingness to sit there and perform manual calculations.
See, I struggle with this idea that paper is somehow a universally better hack just because of the tactile memory. Let's be real for a second.
Okay, let's be real.
If I miss 3 or 4 days of writing down my receipts, looking at that blank notebook is going to give me immense anxiety.
Oh, the avoidance is real.
Catching up becomes this massive chore. Whereas with an app, if I ignore it for 3 days, it's still quietly doing the work for me. Doesn't the high-friction nature of the paper method almost guarantee a higher failure rate for the average overwhelmed person?
You're hitting on the exact reason the source doesn't declare a definitive winner. Yes, the paper method has a much higher barrier to consistent compliance. If you are someone who struggles with executive dysfunction or you just have severe time deficits, the tactile approach might literally just become a notebook of shame that sits in a drawer.
A notebook of shame. I think we all have one of those.
Right. The app, even with its emotional distance, ensures the data is at least captured.
So it's basically a spectrum of needs. You either need the system to hold your hand so you don't quit, or you need the system to slap your wrist so you actually pay attention.
That is a very vivid way to put it, but yes, essentially, it's about diagnosing your own failure points.
So what does this all mean? We have meticulously dissected these two completely divergent paths.
We have.
On one side, we have digital budgeting, and its core tenets are convenience and automation.
Right.
It is designed for the listener who needs instant feedback, who really benefits from visual charts to comprehend their data, and who requires the frictionless accessibility of an app to ensure they actually maintain the habit.
And then on the other side of the ledger, we have paper budgeting. Its core tenets are personal touch and simplicity. It is designed for the listener who needs the cognitive weight of a tactile approach.
The manual transmission drivers.
Exactly. The person who needs to slow down, manually tally their totals, and feel that physical connection to the reality of their income and expenses just to curb their behavioral impulses.
Convenience and automation versus personal touch and simplicity. It feels like a paradox.
If we connect this to the bigger picture,
Right.
the ultimate insight from this source material is that there really is no universal right answer.
Which is frustrating for people who just want a life hack.
I know, I know. But the source refuses to claim that digital is a modern superiority or that paper is some outdated relic. The perfect method is simply the one that resonates with your unique style, your unique brain, and actually keeps you tracking your income and expenses over the long haul.
Because it all traces back to the baseline definition we started with. Budgeting is just the act of tracking income and expenses to control spending and save money. That's the destination of the journey.
Sure.
The glowing pie charts and automated syncing of a mobile app actually keep you engaged and in control? Then congratulations, you have found your perfect method.
And if the physical friction, the scent of the ink and the deliberate slowing down of a notebook keep you accountable, then paper is your perfect method. The tool is utterly secondary to the habit itself. A brilliant digital app you never open is useless. A beautifully bound notebook you never write in is useless.
Which brings us to the final and arguably most urgent directive from the source video. It ends with a very clear call to action for you, the listener.
Yes, it does.
It tells you to take the first step today, not on the first of next month, not when you finally feel like you have your life together, today. It explicitly tells you to either download a digital app right now or physically go find a notebook and start your paper budget to see what works best for you.
Because action generates data, and data reduces overwhelm. That initial step of just choosing a medium breaks the paralysis.
It really does. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final, slightly provocative thought to mull over.
Okay, let's hear it.
We've spent this entire time unpacking these methods strictly based on our source material, but it really highlights something profound about human nature.
Which is?
If the ultimate end goal of budgeting is based on an unbending universal mathematical truth, simply income minus expenses, why is our relationship with that math so easily manipulated? Why does the physical medium we use to record a number, whether it's a glowing pixel generated by an invisible algorithm or a physical line of ink scratched onto a page, have such immense power to dictate whether we feel wealthy, stressed, in control, or completely lost?
It's a brilliant question, and I think it proves that money is rarely just about the math. The math is just the byproduct. Money is fundamentally about emotion and psychology, and the physical tools we choose to observe our behavior inevitably end up shaping that behavior.
A perfect thought to keep in mind as you decide whether to reach for your phone or reach for a pen today. Thank you for joining us as we unpack the mechanics of digital versus paper budgeting, tailored straight from the source, just for you. Keep testing your systems, keep analyzing your habits, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.